At my son's funeral, my daughter-in-law laughed at my tears. That's how the story begins. I can still hear her voice echoing in that cold church, cutting through the air sharper than any knife. "Stop crying," she hissed loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're embarrassing us. Pack your things after this. I don't want you here anymore." People turned their heads away, pretending not to notice. The smell of lilies, the sound of the choir, the quiet sobs in the background, all of it blurred into one unbearable hum. But her words, those cruel words, stayed. They didn't fade. They carved themselves into me. I'm Maria, 70 years old. I buried my only son that morning. He was my pride, my reason to wake up every day after my husband passed. And there I stood, shaking beside his coffin, while the woman he loved humiliated me in front of everyone. The black dress I wore felt too heavy. My knees trembled as I clutched the edge of the pew for balance. I had imagined this day 1,000 times in my nightmares, but never like this. Never with laughter, never with cruelty. Clara, my daughter-in-law, looked perfect as always. Her makeup flawless, her black silk dress hugging her body like she was at a gala, not a funeral. She didn't shed a single tear. Not one. She smiled through the ceremony, whispering to her friends, checking her phone, and occasionally glancing at me with the kind of disgust you reserve for something you've already decided to throw away. I had seen that look before, in the months before my son's death, but I had told myself it was grief or stress or maybe my imagination. I was wrong. It was contempt. When the pastor finished the final prayer, Clara stood by the coffin, hand on her hip. Voice clear. "Thank you all for coming. David would have appreciated your presence." She looked directly at me. "We'll handle everything from here." I opened my mouth to speak, to ask if I could stay a little longer, but she cut me off. "No, Maria. You've done enough. You can pick up your things tomorrow morning." My things. As if I were some stranger she had taken pity on. I wanted to scream to tell everyone that the house she was standing in was built with my hands, my savings, my husband's sweat, but I couldn't. The words died in my throat. The guests began to whisper. Some avoided my eyes, others looked at Clara with unease, but no one said a word. No one dared to stand between a grieving widow and her mother-in-law, not when the power had already shifted. I stood there alone, watching as they closed the coffin. I wanted to touch my son's hand one last time, but Clara placed herself between us. "You've said goodbye enough," she muttered. "Let him rest." I stumbled out of the church into the afternoon sunlight that felt far too bright for a funeral. I could still hear the soft hum of voices behind me, the shuffle of feet, the click of Clara's heels as she followed me out. "Maria," she called, her tone suddenly sweet. I turned, hoping for some scrap of kindness, but instead she leaned closer and whispered, "Don't come back to my house. You're done here." Then she smiled for the cameras as the photographer snapped photos of her standing by the hearse. I stood frozen on the steps, my hands shaking my heart hollow. For a moment I thought I would faint. A woman I had fed, sheltered, and defended was now throwing me out of the only home I had left. My son's coffin disappeared into the black car, and with it went the last piece of my family. That night, I sat alone in my small room above the garage, my so-called guest room, and replayed the day over and over. The laughter, the whispers, the humiliation. Every sound was a wound that refused to close. I wanted to believe that grief had made Clara cruel, that pain had twisted her into someone unrecognizable. But deep down, I knew better. She had been waiting for this moment, waiting for him to die so she could erase me completely. The wind outside howled through the trees, rattling the window. I looked at the photograph of my son on the nightstand, his smile bright, his eyes kind, and whispered, "I'm sorry, David. I failed you." My tears fell onto the glass, blurring his face. Somewhere in the house below, I could hear Clara laughing on the phone, her voice light, careless, like she hadn't buried her husband that morning. When I finally closed my eyes, sleep didn't come, only memories. I saw David as a boy, barefoot in the backyard, chasing the dog through the grass, shouting, "Mama, look at me." I saw the night he introduced me to Clara, the way she looked at him like he was her ticket to something bigger. I should have seen it then. The warning signs were there. The way she flinched when he mentioned family. The way she corrected his grammar at dinner, the way she asked how much my house was worth. I wanted to believe she loved him. I wanted to believe she loved us. At dawn, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my door. Clara's voice was sharp. "Maria, I've left some boxes in the hallway. Pack whatever's yours. The movers will handle the rest." I opened the door to find cardboard boxes stacked neatly, a garbage bag on top. My framed photos, my late husband's watch, my son's baby blanket, all tossed together like clutter. Clara stood at the end of the hall in her robe, coffee in hand, expressionless. "You'll be more comfortable somewhere smaller," she said, "maybe near one of those senior communities." My throat tightened. "This is my home," I said quietly. "I helped build it." She smirked. "Then you should have built it in your name." I wanted to slap that smirk off her face, but I didn't. I just nodded, slowly walked back inside and closed the door. Because sometimes silence is stronger than any scream. I sat on the bed surrounded by boxes, the morning sun creeping through the curtains, and something inside me shifted. The kind of shift that happens when pain becomes resolve. You see, Clara thought I was powerless. She thought the story ended with her victory. But stories don't end at funerals. They begin there. Because what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that David had left me something. Something small, hidden, sealed away before he died. He gave it to me himself 2 days before the accident, saying only, "Keep this safe, Mom. Promise me." I had promised, and I had kept it sealed, too scared to open it, too lost in grief to wonder why. But that night, after Clara's laughter faded downstairs, I took out that small wooden box from my drawer. I placed it on my lap, traced my fingers over the carved initials DM, and whispered, "What did you leave me, my son?" If I had known then what was inside, I would have opened it right away, but I waited. Because sometimes, even the truth has its own timing, and when it came, it changed everything. If you think no mother should ever be humiliated at her child's funeral, comment one. If you believe silence can be the strongest revenge, leave a like, because what came next would prove both true. The signs had always been there. I just refused to see them. It's strange how love can make you blind, even when the truth is staring you right in the face. I used to think Clara was simply ambitious, that her sharp tone and restless energy came from wanting a better life for my son. But now looking back, I realize ambition was only the mask. Underneath it was something colder, a hunger for control. It started quietly long before David fell ill. The first time she moved something in the house without asking me, I thought it was just her trying to help. I came downstairs one morning to find that every photo of my late husband and me had been replaced with framed quotes about modern family living. She said it was to make the living room feel less depressing. I remember her standing there, rearranging the shelves, her tone light. "Don't take it personally, Maria. You're just sentimental. People your age usually are." I laughed awkwardly, trying to smooth things over. But that night, I put all the old photos back. The next morning, they were gone again. That's when I started keeping them in my room. David never noticed, or maybe he did and pretended not to. My son was gentle, too gentle. He had spent his life avoiding conflict, the kind of man who apologized when other people bumped into him. I told him once, "Son, sometimes silence can protect peace, but other times it just feeds cruelty." He smiled and said, "Mom, Clara just wants things her way. It's easier to let her." Easier for him, maybe. For me, it was suffocating. There was another moment I can't forget. It was a Sunday morning, the kind David and I used to spend cooking pancakes together when he was little. Clara came into the kitchen, looked at the mess we made, and sighed. "This isn't how adults eat breakfast, Maria. You make everything feel like a daycare." I tried to joke. "Maybe that's why my pancakes taste like childhood." She didn't laugh. "We're not children anymore," she said. "It's time to grow up." That word hit me in a way I couldn't explain. Somewhere between those 3 letters, I realized I wasn't part of that we. It was her and David now, not me, not family. Months passed, and little by little, she claimed pieces of the house as her own. The old rocking chair by the window disappeared one day. She said it didn't match the decor. The flower garden I'd tended for 20 years was replaced with artificial grass because real soil attracts bugs. Even the smell of the house changed from lavender and fresh bread to disinfectant and expensive perfume. I told myself she was young and modern, that I was just an old woman stuck in her ways. But deep down, I knew I was being erased. The first real crack appeared the night I overheard them arguing. It was late, almost midnight. I had gone to the kitchen for a glass of water when I heard Clara's voice sharp whispering through the thin walls. She needs to stop interfering, David. She's old. She should move to a retirement place. I can't live like this anymore. David's voice came next, tired but defensive. She's my mother, Clara. She's not going anywhere. Not yet, Clara said, her tone suddenly soft and dangerous. But she will. Sooner or later, she will. I stood there frozen. The water glass trembling in my hand, I remember the way the refrigerator hummed the faint ticking of the wall clock, the silence that followed her words. I wanted to burst in to defend myself, to remind them both that I wasn't deaf or invisible. But I didn't. I walked back to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. When David came to check on me the next morning, I pretended everything was fine. "You were up late," he said. "Did you sleep?" "I did," I lied. "Just old bones keeping me awake." He smiled, kissed my forehead, and went off to work. I watched him go, wondering if he'd ever realize that the woman he loved was slowly building a world without me in it. The following week, Clara started handling the mail. "It's just easier," she said. "You always forget to check it." But I didn't forget. I simply respected privacy. One afternoon, I noticed a bank envelope addressed to David that she tucked into her purse before I could see. When I asked about it, she said, "Just bills." Bills. That word became her favorite excuse. Bills, forms, insurance paperwork, all reasons to keep me out of their affairs. Then came the day she crossed the invisible line between control and cruelty. It was a rainy Tuesday. I was folding laundry in the living room when she came in holding one of my old blouses. "You really should throw these away," she said. "They smell like mothballs. And honestly, they make you look tired." I stared at her for a moment, trying to decide if she was joking. She wasn't. I took the blouse gently from her hand. "Clara," I said softly, "this was the first thing David bought me after he got his first paycheck." She rolled her eyes. "Exactly. That was what 30 years ago time to let go." Something inside me cracked a little. "Not everything old is worthless," I said. Her eyes narrowed. Maybe not, but some things outlive their usefulness. Then she smiled and walked away humming to herself. That night, I couldn't eat. I sat in the kitchen staring at the same blouse folded neatly on the table. Her words kept echoing, "Outlive their usefulness." That's what she thought of me. Not as a person, as furniture too heavy to move, too familiar to throw away, waiting to be replaced. And David. My sweet, gentle David never noticed. Or maybe he chose not to. I watched as his health started to fade, how Clara used his exhaustion as proof that he needed less stress around the house. Less stress meant fewer visits from me, fewer conversations, fewer moments where he remembered who he used to be before she molded him into someone quiet and obedient. One evening, when he was already sick and barely eating, I brought soup to his room. Clara stopped me at the door. "He's sleeping," she said. "Let him rest." "I just want to make sure he eats," I insisted. "He's fine, Maria. You hovering doesn't help." I looked over her shoulder and saw my son lying pale on the bed, eyes half open, whispering my name. Clara shut the door before I could step inside. That night I sat outside his door for hours, listening to his shallow breathing through the wall. Every rise and fall of his chest was a reminder that I was losing him. Not just to illness, but to her. Looking back now, I realized that was the first stage of my erasure. Clara didn't shout, didn't threaten, didn't push. She simply removed me inch by inch from every part of his life, like pulling threads from a fabric until it unravels. People often ask me when I knew she hated me. The truth. It wasn't that night. It wasn't even when she told me to pack my bags after the funeral. It was much earlier on that quiet morning when she looked at me across the breakfast table and said with a smile, "One day, Maria, you'll thank me for simplifying your life." I didn't know it then, but she meant it literally. If you've ever seen the first cracks before a storm and ignored them, you'll understand. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come with thunder. It comes with a whisper, a smile, and a perfectly folded blouse. If you believe kindness should never be mistaken for weakness, comment 1. If you think silence can expose cruelty faster than anger ever could, leave a like. The months before David's death felt like a slow, suffocating descent into silence. Every day, Clara's presence in the house grew larger, while mine faded into the background. She took over every space, every decision, every word spoken under that roof. It wasn't a home anymore. It was her stage, and my grief was part of the scenery. When David first fell sick, it started with exhaustion, long work hours, poor sleep, and constant stress. I told him to see a doctor, but Clara insisted it was just burnout. She always had an answer ready, a calm confidence that made me question my instincts. By the time David finally went to the hospital, it was already serious. Liver failure, the doctor said. He would need rest medication and constant monitoring. I still remember Clara's reaction in the doctor's office. She didn't cry, didn't even flinch. She just crossed her legs, pulled out her planner, and said, "All right, let's organize this properly." The doctor looked at me with pity, perhaps sensing something off, but said nothing. That's how Clara operated, smooth, composed, untouchable. The first few weeks, I tried to be there every day. I cooked, I cleaned, I prayed. I slept in a chair beside his hospital bed, but Clara started setting boundaries. "Maria, you need to rest," she said. "You're not young anymore. Let me take care of him." I wanted to believe she meant it. I wanted to believe she loved him. But there was something in her tone, a warning disguised as kindness. At first, it was small restrictions. She changed the hospital schedule so I could only visit in the afternoon to avoid tiring him out. Then it became just 2 hours a day. When I protested, she said, "The doctors agree. You stress him." I asked David about it once, and he smiled weakly. "Mom, don't argue with her. It's easier this way." Easier. That word again. It followed me like a ghost. One afternoon when I arrived early, I overheard Clara speaking to the nurse. Her voice was low but firm. "If Mrs. Lopez calls or asks questions about his treatment, please direct her to me. She gets emotional and confuses the staff." Confuses the staff? As if I were some senile old woman incapable of understanding medical updates. When the nurse saw me, she looked away. I stood there holding a basket of fruit I had bought for David, and something inside me cracked. But instead of confronting her, I turned around and left, because I knew if I made a scene, Clara would use it against me. At home, she took over the finances completely. "David's not working," she said. "I'll handle the bills." When I asked about the mortgage, she told me not to worry. "It's all under control." I wanted to see the paperwork, but she smiled. "Maria, you wouldn't understand. Let me do this." That was the moment I realized I no longer existed in their life on paper. The woman who had built that house, who had paid the first installment with her savings, was now invisible. Then came the whispers from friends and neighbors. Helen, the woman next door, came by one morning, clutching her coffee mug like she was afraid of her own words. "Maria," she said quietly, "I don't know how to tell you this, but I saw Clara at the bank yesterday. She was closing an account in David's name." I stared at her confused. "Closing it?" Helen nodded. I asked about David, and she said it was time to consolidate assets. It didn't sound right. I thanked her, trying to keep my hands from shaking. That night, I waited until Clara left for the hospital and went through the desk drawer in the living room. The paperwork was all gone. Every folder, every bank statement, every insurance file gone. Only one piece of paper remained, a note that read, "Please respect our privacy." I sat there in the dark for hours, surrounded by emptiness. The walls that had once echoed with laughter now held only the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of rain against the windows. One evening, I confronted Clara. "Why did you close David's account?" She didn't even look up from her phone. "Because it was time." "Time for what?" "To move forward. The doctor said he won't be able to work again and bills don't pay themselves." "Did you ask him first?" She met my gaze, then her smile thin. "He trusts me. You should too." That was when I realized she wasn't just taking care of him. She was taking control of everything he owned. The next day when I went to visit David, the nurse told me he'd been discharged. "Already?" I asked. "He's not well enough." His wife insisted, she said softly. I rushed home, and there he was, lying on the couch, pale and weak, while Clara scrolled through her phone. He's more comfortable here, she said. Hospitals make him anxious. He reached for my hand, his voice barely a whisper. Mom, it's okay. But it wasn't. I could see how his skin had turned gray, how his breathing was shallow. He needed care, and Clara was too busy redecorating. The living room had new curtains, new cushions, a new flat-screen TV, but no medicine on the table, no doctor visits scheduled. When I tried to help, she snapped. Stop acting like a nurse, Maria. You're making things worse. Go rest. I can't rest while my son is dying, I said. Her eyes went cold. He's not dying, and if he is, at least he'll die in peace, not smothered by guilt from you. That night, I heard them arguing again. David's voice was faint, pleading. Don't talk to her like that, Clara. Then tell her to stop interfering, she shot back. You're sick because of her stress, because she never lets go. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. That was her game, turning his love for me into guilt, making him believe that caring for his mother was a burden. Weeks later, his condition worsened. Clara hired a private nurse who reported only to her. My access became limited to visiting hours in my own home. The house that once smelled of soup and candle wax now smelled like antiseptic and perfume. The day the doctor told us it was terminal, Clara didn't shed a tear. She thanked him politely, then turned to me and said, "We'll manage the paperwork." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I walked outside, stood by the garden, and watched the artificial grass glisten under the rain. Not a single real flower remained. I realized then that Clara had already buried the living before the dead. One afternoon, Helen visited again. "Maria," she whispered, "I saw a notary leaving your house last week." A notary. Yes, Clara was signing papers. My heart sank. Do you know what kind? Helen hesitated. It looked like something official. Maybe a will. A will. My breath caught. I ran inside straight to David's room, but he was asleep, frail, barely moving. On the nightstand was a pen and an envelope with his name on it. I wanted to open it, but I couldn't. I left it there, terrified of what it might confirm. That was the last week my son spoke more than a few words. Every day after his silence grew longer, his skin paler. I tried to tell myself he'd recover, but in my heart I knew. I just didn't know what Clara was preparing behind those closed doors. When he passed, it was quiet, peaceful almost, but what came after was anything but peace, because I later found out that Clara had made sure every asset, every policy, every account was redirected to her. She even called the lawyer before the funeral. I sat in the hospital hallway, clutching his hand one last time, whispering prayers that fell like ashes. And that was the moment I stopped being a mother and became a ghost alive, but unseen. If you've ever watched someone twist love into power, you'll understand. Betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it smiles and says, "Don't worry, I've got it handled." If you believe control disguised as care is still control, comment 1. If you think silence in the face of manipulation can be louder than confrontation, leave a like. The last month of David's life felt like standing in a burning house while everyone pretended nothing was wrong. Each day was quieter than the one before, and in that silence, Clara's control became absolute. She didn't need to raise her voice anymore. Every word she said was a command wrapped in politeness. Every smile was a warning not to resist. It started when the private nurse stopped talking to me. She used to greet me every morning, tell me about David's temperature, the medication schedule, the small improvements that kept my hope alive. But one morning, she just nodded curtly and turned away. "Mrs. Mitchell said not to disturb you," she explained. "She's handling communication from now on." Handling communication, as if love required permission slips. The next day, my access to David's room became restricted. "He needs rest," Clara said, standing at the doorway like a security guard. "You make him emotional, Maria. He needs calm." "I am his calm," I said. "I'm his mother." She folded her arms. "Not anymore." Those 3 words broke something inside me. I stood there staring at the door that used to open easily for me, but now felt like a wall. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just being pushed aside, I was being erased. After that, I saw David less and less. Sometimes she'd let me in for 5 minutes, just long enough for him to smile faintly and whisper, "I love you, Mom." His hand would tremble in mine, and I'd want to stay, but Clara would tap her watch and say, "Time's up." The nurse avoided eye contact. The neighbors stopped visiting. Everyone believed Clara's version of events, that I was the emotional, unstable mother making things harder. She told them I was in denial about David's condition. "Poor thing," she said to one neighbor within my earshot. "She doesn't understand how medicine works. She thinks love can cure everything." The humiliation wasn't loud. It was quiet, methodical, like erosion. One day, you're part of the family, the next, you're just a problem to be managed. Then came the day of the fundraiser. Clara organized a small event to support awareness for David's illness, but it felt more like a networking opportunity for her real estate business. The house was full of people, music, wine, laughter. David was upstairs too weak to sit up. I begged her to cancel. "He needs peace," I said. She smiled sweetly. "He'd want me to do this. He always said life must go on." "Life," I whispered, "or your reputation." She tilted her head, her voice sugar-coated. "Careful, Maria. People are listening." That night, when the guests finally left, I went to check on David. He was pale, his breathing shallow. I tried to call the doctor, but Clara snatched the phone from my hand. "He doesn't need a doctor," she snapped. "He needs quiet. You make everything worse with your panic." "I'm not panicking," I shouted for the first time in weeks. "He needs help." "Lower your voice," she hissed. "You're scaring him." "I'm trying to save him." For a second, our eyes met hers, cold mind, desperate. Then in one swift motion, she slapped the phone onto the counter and said, "If you don't trust me, get out." I froze. "What did you say?" "Get out." David stirred weakly from his bed, his voice barely audible. "Clara, stop." But she didn't stop. "You've been poisoning this house with your tears, your pity, your weakness. He doesn't need that. He needs strength." I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the man who once built this home beside me. His lips moved like he wanted to speak, but no sound came. His eyes filled with apology, not for what she said, but for not stopping it. I turned and walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I stayed at Helen's house next door. She gave me tea, held my hand, and said, "You can't go back there tonight. Rest. Tomorrow will be different." But tomorrow wasn't different. The next morning, when I returned, Clara met me at the door with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He's sleeping," she said. "He doesn't need visitors today." "I'm not a visitor." "Today you are." I tried to step around her, but she blocked me. "I'll call the nurse," she warned. "Call whoever you want," I said. "I'm seeing my son." We stood there for a long moment, mother and widow, love and ambition colliding in a silent war. Then she sighed and stepped aside, waving a hand like a queen granting permission. David was asleep, his body thinner than ever, his chest rising and falling weakly. I sat beside him and whispered, "I'm here, baby." He opened his eyes, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Mom, don't fight her. Promise me." Tears blurred my vision. "Why would you say that?" She means well," he said, his voice trembling. I wanted to scream the truth at him, that she was stealing from him, isolating him, turning his final days into a performance. But I couldn't. He was dying, and I couldn't poison his last moments with anger. So I just held his hand and said, "I promise." He fell asleep again, and I sat there until Clara came back. "Time's up," she said softly. I left without a word. That was the last real conversation I ever had with my son. A week later, I got a call from the hospital. "Mrs. Mitchell, the nurse, said we're so sorry. David's been admitted again." I rushed there, my heart pounding. When I arrived, Clara was already at the desk speaking with the doctor. She turned when she saw me, her expression unreadable. "You can't go in yet," she said. "Why not?" "They're stabilizing him." I waited in the hallway for what felt like hours. When the doctor finally came out, his eyes told me everything before his words did. "I'm sorry," he said. I collapsed. I don't remember the sound I made, only the echo of my own voice calling my son's name. Clara stood beside me, dry-eyed, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "He's at peace now," she whispered. Peace, that's what she called it. The funeral came and went like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. People came, said their condolences, and left. But what I remember most was Clara's calm, her perfect composure, her speeches about moving forward. She played the grieving widow so well I almost believed her. Almost. After the burial, when the guests were gone and the silence of the house swallowed me whole, I went to David's room. His things were gone. His clothes, his books, the photo of us on his graduation day, all gone. In their place were packing boxes labeled donations. "What are you doing?" I asked. Clara didn't even look up. "Cleaning. It's time to move on." "It's been one day." She shrugged. "Grief doesn't pay the bills." That was when I saw it, a small wooden box sitting on the dresser, the same one David had given me 2 days before the accident. "Keep this safe, Mom. Promise me." I reached for it, but Clara stepped between us. "That's David's," she said. "Yes," I whispered, "and he gave it to me." Her eyes narrowed. "Then prove it." I held her gaze for a long time before saying, "I don't need to prove anything. He trusted me. That's proof enough." For the first time, her confidence faltered. Only for a second, but I saw it the flicker of fear. She turned away quickly, pretending to rearrange the flowers on the dresser. "Do whatever you want," she said. "I don't care." But she cared. I could tell. That night, I took the box to my room and locked the door. I didn't open it yet. I just sat there, clutching it to my chest like a heartbeat I couldn't let go of. Outside, the house was silent, except for the sound of Clara's footsteps pacing the hallway. If you've ever been surrounded by people yet completely alone, you'll understand that silence. It's the kind that doesn't just hurt your ears, it hurts your soul. If you believe no mother should be turned into a stranger in her own home, comment one. If you've ever been silenced but refused to disappear, leave a like. I used to think grief had a bottom, a point where the pain finally stopped deepening, where the heart simply couldn't break any further. I was wrong. There's always another layer beneath the last, another cut waiting under the scar. The day after the funeral, I discovered that pain could still surprise me. The morning sunlight poured through the windows, warm and golden, but the house felt like ice. I could still smell the flowers from the service. Their sweetness turned sour from sitting too long. The black ribbons on the front gate fluttered weakly in the breeze, like a reminder that death hadn't finished its business here. I moved slowly through the hall, half expecting to hear my son's voice, half dreading the silence that replaced it. Downstairs, Clara was already awake, her voice sharp and mechanical as she spoke on the phone. "Yes, transfer the funds from his account to mine. Yes, the insurance claim was filed yesterday. No, his mother isn't an authorized contact." I stopped in the doorway. She looked up startled for just a moment before smiling that tight, polite smile I'd come to hate. "Good morning, Maria. You scared me." I ignored the greeting. "You filed the insurance claim already." She hung up the phone and poured herself coffee. Of course. Someone has to take care of these things. David would have wanted me to. He's been gone for 2 days. My voice trembled not from fear but disbelief. "And life goes on," she said simply. "You can't live in the past." I looked around at the living room that had once been filled with warmth. His guitar by the fireplace, my old photo albums stacked on the table, the smell of cinnamon from my morning baking, all of it gone, in their place boxes, labeled, numbered, sealed. "What are these?" I asked quietly. She didn't even look up. "Your things?" "My things. I had the movers pack them up last night. You'll be more comfortable somewhere quieter." I took a step forward. "You're throwing me out." She shrugged. "I wouldn't put it that way. I'm suggesting a change of scenery. It's for the best." "For whose best?" I whispered. She looked at me with a cold pity that made my stomach twist. "For everyone's." "You've been through a lot, Maria. You need peace. There's a senior community not far from here. They have lovely gardens." My pulse pounded in my ears. "This is my home. I built it with my husband. David grew up here." "Correction," she said softly, sipping her coffee. "It was our home, David's and mine, and now it's mine." For a moment, I thought I might faint. The room spun. "You think you can just erase me?" Her expression hardened. "You're not being erased, Maria. You're being retired." I wanted to scream, to throw something to make her see that beneath the wrinkles and gray hair was still a mother who had given her everything. But I didn't. I just stood there staring at her, wondering what my son had ever seen in her smile. The doorbell rang. Clara turned calmly and opened it. 2 men in moving uniforms stepped inside. "Where do you want these boxes, ma'am?" one of them asked. She gestured toward the door. "In the truck. All of them." I could barely breathe. "Clara," I said, "please, at least let me keep David's room." She shook her head. "I'm redecorating. It's too painful to look at." "Painful for who?" "For me," she said, and something cruel glimmered behind her eyes. The movers carried the boxes out one by one. I watched them take away 40 years of my life in silence. When they lifted the last one, I felt something inside me collapse completely. I had lost my husband, my son, my home, and now even my memories were being packed and labeled as clutter. When they left, Clara handed me an envelope. There's a little money inside. Enough for a few weeks. I'm not heartless. I looked at the envelope, then at her. You think money replaces love? She smiled thinly. Love doesn't pay rent. The words hit harder than I expected. For a moment I thought about the night David had introduced her to me, how she had shaken my hand with both of hers and said, "You feel like the mother I never had." I had believed her. I had welcomed her. I had given her everything. And now she was giving me a handful of cash and the door. I didn't take the envelope. One day, Clara, I said quietly, "You'll regret this." She laughed an ugly, hollow sound. The only thing I'll regret is not doing it sooner. I walked upstairs to my room, the one she called the guest room now, and sat on the bed. The wooden box lay on the nightstand just where I had left it. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was small, barely the size of a shoebox made of dark mahogany with my son's initials carved into the lid. DM. The letters were smooth from years of touch. I traced them with my thumb and whispered, "What did you want me to see, my boy?" For days I had avoided opening it. Fear, maybe, or grief, or both. But now, with the echo of Clara's laughter ringing through the house, I knew I had nothing left to lose. I unlatched the clasp slowly. Inside, wrapped in a folded handkerchief, was a sealed envelope. On it, my name, Mom, written in David's neat handwriting. My breath caught. The sight of it was enough to make my heart stumble. Underneath the envelope was a flash drive, silver and small. I didn't know what it contained, but I didn't care yet. The letter came first. I opened it with shaking hands. The first line blurred through my tears. "If you're reading this, Mom, it means I couldn't tell you in person." I pressed the paper to my chest, sobbing silently. His words continued. "You were right about her, about everything. I wanted to believe she loved me, but I see now that love doesn't look like control. I was too weak to stand up to her, but I won't let her destroy you after I'm gone. I changed my will. Everything I own goes to you. The house, the savings, the insurance, all of it. It's yours, Mom. Don't let her tell you otherwise." I read those lines over and over until they blurred together. My son, even in death, was still protecting me. "There's proof on the flash drive. Give it to Mr. Collins. He'll know what to do." Mr. Collins, David's lawyer. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since my husband's death. I clutched the letter, my tears soaking the ink. Downstairs, I could hear Clara talking again, her laughter sharp echoing through the house like glass breaking. I folded the letter, carefully placed it back in the box, and whispered, "I promise, David. I'll make this right." When I stepped out of my room, Clara was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. All packed, she asked cheerfully as if we were discussing a vacation. "Yes," I said softly, "I'm leaving." She looked almost disappointed, like she had hoped for a fight. "Good, the taxi's waiting. Don't worry about coming back. I'll forward your mail." I nodded, clutching the wooden box to my chest as I walked past her. She didn't notice the tears in my eyes, or maybe she didn't care. To her, I was just luggage, heavy old, and finally out of the way. But as I stepped into the sunlight, something inside me shifted. It wasn't defeat, it was clarity. She thought she'd won. She thought she had erased me. But she didn't know about the letter. She didn't know about the flash drive. As the taxi drove away, I looked back one last time at the house I had built, the house she had stolen. For the first time, I didn't cry, because grief had turned into something else now, something sharper, something steady. If you've ever reached the point where heartbreak turns into resolve, you'll understand. That's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of the reckoning. If you believe dignity is the one thing no one can take from you, comment 1. If you've ever turned silence into strength, leave a like. The taxi dropped me at a small law office on Maple Street. I hadn't been there in almost a decade, not since my husband's will was settled. The sign on the door was the same Collins and Associates estate and property law. I took a deep breath before pushing the door open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, a smell that brought back memories of another kind of grief. A young assistant looked up from behind the desk. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I nodded. "Yes, I'm here to see Mr. Collins. Tell him Maria Mitchell would like a word. He knew my husband Robert and my son David. Her polite smile faltered for just a moment as if she recognized the name. Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. One moment. She disappeared into the back office. A few minutes later, a man in his 60s emerged, his hair gray, his suit immaculate. Maria, he said, surprise and concern mixing in his voice. I'm so sorry about David. I was at the service, but I didn't want to disturb you. Thank you, I said quietly. There's something I need to show you. He gestured toward his office. Come in. I followed him into the familiar room lined with shelves of thick legal volumes. Sunlight filtered through half-closed blinds, striping the carpet in gold and shadow. I sat down and placed the small wooden box on his desk. I think David wanted me to bring this to you, I said. He looked at it carefully. I recognize this handwriting, he murmured as I handed him the envelope. He brought in a will last year, asked me to update some details, said it was urgent. I leaned forward. Did he ever mention what it was about? He didn't, Collins said, pulling out his reading glasses. But he seemed uneasy. Said he wanted to make sure his mother would be protected. Protected, the word lodged in my throat. He unfolded the letter, reading in silence. When he looked up, his eyes were softer. He left everything to you, Maria. Every cent, the house, the accounts, the life insurance, everything. I blinked, trying to process the words. Are you sure? He nodded. Completely. His wife was never added to the deed. David told me he didn't trust her with long-term finances. He said, and I quote, "If anything happens to me, my mother should have control." I pressed my trembling hands together. Then why is she living there claiming it's hers? He sighed. Because you haven't enforced your rights yet. The updated will was filed but not executed publicly. She's acting on the assumption that the old documents still stand. Can that be fixed? I asked. He smiled faintly. It can be more than fixed. It can be corrected. He opened the box again, finding the small flash drive. May I? I nodded. He plugged it into his computer, and after a few seconds, a video appeared on the screen. My heart stopped when I saw my son's face, pale, tired, but smiling. Hi, Mom, he said softly. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it. My breath caught. Collins turned the monitor slightly toward me and sat back, giving me space to watch. David's voice was calm, steady, full of the same quiet strength I remembered from his childhood. I wanted you to know that I saw everything. I know what she did, how she spoke to you, how she tried to make you feel small. I should have stopped it sooner. I'm sorry, Mom, but I've made sure she can't hurt you again. I transferred the house back into your name. Mr. Collins has all the paperwork. The insurance is in your name, too. Don't let her bully you. Live your life with peace. He paused, his eyes wet. You always said silence can be powerful. You were right, but sometimes it's okay to speak up too. Promise me you'll do that. Promise you'll stand up for yourself. The screen went black. I couldn't breathe. Tears spilled freely down my cheeks, but they weren't the same tears I'd cried before. These weren't from helplessness. They were from awakening. My son had seen through everything. He had left me not just money or property, but a voice. A way to reclaim my dignity. Collins cleared his throat gently. Maria, I can file this immediately. Legally, everything is already yours, but we need to serve her with notice. Serve her. Yes. Formal notification that she's occupying your property illegally. We can do it quietly or publicly. I thought about Clara's laughter at the funeral, the way she handed me boxes like garbage, the way she looked at me like I was already dead. Quietly wasn't enough. Not this time. I want it to be public, I said. My voice surprised even me, calm, deliberate, certain. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. As you wish. I'll prepare the documents. You'll need witnesses, though. A memory flashed through my mind. 3 women at the funeral. Clara's real estate colleagues, the ones who had watched her play the grieving widow while gossiping about property values. I smiled faintly. I already have a few in mind. Collins raised an eyebrow. You're planning something, aren't you? I'm planning the truth, I said. He leaned back, the faintest glimmer of admiration in his eyes. David would be proud. I left the office clutching a folder filled with documents that could change everything. For the first time in months, I walked with my shoulders straight. The sun felt warmer. The air felt lighter. I was still grieving, but grief wasn't steering me anymore. Purpose was. That evening, I returned to Helen's house. She was in the garden trimming roses when she saw me. "Maria," she gasped, dropping her shears. "You look different. What happened?" I found my voice, I said simply. Inside, over tea, I told her everything, the letter, the video, the will. Her eyes widened with every word. "So the house is yours?" "It always was," I said. "I just didn't realize I needed to prove it." Helen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What will you do now?" I looked out the window toward the house next door. The house Clara was probably redecorating that very moment, believing her future was secure. "I'm going to let her keep building her illusion," I said. "Just for a few more days. The higher she climbs, the harder the fall." Helen smiled slowly. "You're not done, are you?" "Not even close." That night, I sat alone in the quiet room Helen had offered me. On the table lay David's letter, carefully refolded. I lit a candle beside it and whispered, "You kept your promise, my love. Now it's my turn." The next morning, I called Collins. "Prepare the notice," I said, "but don't send it yet. I want to be there when she reads it." He hesitated. "Maria, that could get emotional." "It will," I said, "and that's the point." I spent the next 2 days gathering every trace of evidence: bank statements, old deeds, insurance letters, copies of checks. Collins helped me organize everything into neat folders labeled clearly: house ownership, life insurance, property taxes, witness statements. Years of paperwork I'd once been mocked for keeping had become my shield. My husband had always teased me for being meticulous. "You and your files," he used to say. "One day they'll bury us with those folders." He was right, just not in the way either of us imagined. By the third day, everything was ready. Collins arranged a formal meeting at the real estate office where Clara worked. "It's neutral ground," he said, "public enough to prevent a scene, private enough for documentation." I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips as I signed the final paper authorizing the legal notice. Clara had no idea what was coming. She thought she'd buried her past with David. She thought the silence she left behind was permanent. But silence has a way of echoing when the truth starts to speak. As I walked out of the law office, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds. The light caught the windows of my house across the street, and for the first time since my son's death, it didn't feel like a prison. It felt like something waiting to be reclaimed. The woman who left that building wasn't the same one who had been thrown out of her home in tears. That woman had died at the funeral. What remained was something else entirely, something quiet but unbreakable. If you've ever reached the moment when grief turns into resolve, you know this feeling. It's not anger. It's not vengeance. It's truth waking up. If you believe that justice doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers, comment one. If you've ever found strength in stillness, leave a like. The morning of the meeting arrived with a kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt loaded. The air itself seemed to know something was coming. I dressed carefully, not for revenge, but for respect. A clean white blouse, a dark skirt, and my late husband's watch on my wrist. I wanted to look like what I had always been: steady, dignified, unbroken. Helen walked me to the car. "You sure you don't want me there?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "Not yet. This part is mine alone." The drive to the real estate office felt longer than it was. Every mile, every red light, every face passing by outside the window reminded me of how far I'd come since that day at the funeral. I had walked into that church as a grieving mother. I was walking into this meeting as something else entirely, a woman who finally understood her own strength. When I stepped through the glass doors of Premier Realty, the air conditioning hit me like a wave. Cold, crisp, impersonal. The kind of air that keeps people from sweating while they lie. I told the receptionist my name. She blinked twice, then said, "Oh, yes. Mrs. Mitchell. Mrs. Clara Mitchell is expecting you. You can go right in." I smiled faintly. "I'm sure she is." Clara's office was bright and sleek, a perfect reflection of her. White furniture, gold accents, everything in perfect alignment. She looked up from her desk as I entered, her eyes narrowing slightly before she plastered on that professional smile. "Maria," she said smoothly, "what a surprise." "Not really," I replied. "You knew I'd come eventually." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Please sit. I don't have much time. I'm meeting a client soon." I stayed standing. "This won't take long." Her eyebrows lifted. "All right, what can I do for you?" "You can start by explaining why you filed an insurance claim 2 days after my son's funeral." Her smile froze for a second. I don't see how that's your concern. Everything that concerns David is my concern, I said evenly. She sighed, leaning back in her chair. Maria, I understand you're upset. Grief can make people irrational. But we both know David wanted me to handle things. He trusted me with his estate. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Did he tell you that before or after he signed the new will? The color drained slightly from her face. What will? I watched her carefully. The one he filed last year. The one that leaves everything to me. For a moment her mask slipped. Her lips parted. Her eyes darted to the papers on her desk. Then she laughed, sharp and brittle. That's ridiculous. You're confused. David would never, I interrupted her. Would never what? Choose his mother over the woman who insulted her at his funeral? Over the woman who called her a burden while she was holding his coffin. Her laughter faltered. You're exaggerating. No, I said quietly. You're forgetting that other people were there. They heard every word. She stood abruptly, crossing her arms. This is pointless. You can't prove anything. You're wasting my time. I took a slow step forward, placing a folder on her desk. You might want to open that before you decide what's a waste of time. She hesitated, then flipped it open. Inside were copies of the property deed bank records and the signed will. Her fingers trembled slightly as she scanned the pages. Where did you get these? From your husband, I said. She looked up sharply. He's dead. Not in the ways that matter, I replied. He left his voice behind. Her eyes darted toward the small flash drive on top of the papers. I could see her calculating fight or flee, deny or manipulate. She chose denial. This doesn't mean anything. He was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly. I nodded slowly. I thought you'd say that, but there's one thing you should know, Clara. David recorded everything himself, his voice, his words, his decisions, on video, and your lawyer will be hearing it soon. For the first time since I'd met her, Clara's confidence cracked wide open. She tried to hide it behind sarcasm. So this is your big revenge march in here with your little folder pretending to be important. No, I said, this isn't revenge, this is correction. She scoffed. You really think anyone will take you seriously? You're an old woman living off pity. Nobody listens to people like you anymore. I smiled, then not kindly, not cruelly, just with truth. That's where you're wrong. They're not listening to me. They're listening to him. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For a long moment, the only noise in the room was the ticking of her gold clock. I picked up the flash drive and held it between my fingers. You'll get your chance to see what he thought of you, I said. Tomorrow, here, with your colleagues present. You can't just— I can, I said, cutting her off. It's my house. My son's estate, my name on the deed. And if you don't show up, I'll let the law handle it publicly. Her face twisted into something between rage and fear. You think you can humiliate me in front of everyone? I met her gaze evenly. No, Clara, you did that yourself. I'm just letting the truth have an audience. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the woman who had taken everything from me and the woman she thought she had destroyed. In her eyes, I saw panic beginning to bloom, but behind it was disbelief. She still didn't fully grasp that the story had shifted, that her role as the powerful widow was ending. Finally, she straightened her posture, forcing her voice to steady. Fine. If you want a show, I'll give you one. But don't say I didn't warn you. You're playing with things you don't understand. I stepped closer until we were nearly face to face. I understand perfectly. You mistake cruelty for power. But power isn't how loud you can speak. It's how long the truth can stand after the noise fades. Her jaw tightened. She wanted to slap me, I could feel it. But she didn't. She couldn't. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure she could win. I turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. One more thing, I said, without looking back. When the truth comes out, try to remember this moment. The moment I gave you the chance to apologize. I heard her laugh bitterly behind me. Apologize to you. You're delusional. I looked over my shoulder, meeting her glare. No, Clara, I'm free. I left her standing there, surrounded by gold furniture, and lies the sound of my heels echoing through the sterile hallway like a countdown. Outside, the sunlight was blinding. I leaned against the car for a moment, breathing in the air, letting the tension drain from my body. My hands were trembling not from fear, but from the rush of finally speaking after too long being silent. I had expected to feel rage or triumph, but instead what I felt was peace. A calm so deep it almost frightened me, and when I looked back through the glass doors, I saw Clara at her desk again, phone in hand, pretending to work. But I could see at the nervous twitch in her hand, the rigid way she sat. She was rattled, and that was enough for now. That night, Helen came over with dinner. "How did it go?" she asked, setting the casserole on the table. "She's cracking," I said quietly. "Tomorrow we'll finish it." Helen smiled. "Do you ever get scared?" "Of her? Not anymore." I took a sip of tea, staring out the window at the house across the street. Its windows were dark, except for one, the office. Clara's shadow moved behind the curtains, pacing. "The thing about people who build lives on lies," I said softly, "is that they think truth needs noise to matter. But truth waits. It's patient. It always shows up when you least expect it." Helen nodded slowly. "Tomorrow's going to be big, isn't it?" "Yes," I said, looking down at the flash drive in my hand. "Tomorrow's when the quiet ends." If you've ever stood face to face with someone who thought they broke you, you know the power of calm. It's not about shouting, it's about letting them hear their own fear in the silence you leave behind. If you believe revenge doesn't always need anger, sometimes it only needs truth. Comment 1. If you've ever faced your abuser with calm eyes and steady hands, leave a like. The next morning, the air felt heavier than usual, thick with something that wasn't quite dread but wasn't peace either. The kind of quiet that settles before a storm. I woke early, dressed in the same white blouse and dark skirt, pinned my hair neatly, and looked at my reflection one last time. The woman staring back wasn't the one who had been thrown out of her home. That woman had died with her son. What stood here now was someone reborn from silence. At 10 sharp, I arrived at Premier Realty with Mr. Collins by my side. He carried a leather briefcase stuffed with documents that could erase every lie Clara had built. As we entered, the receptionist's eyes widened. "Mrs. Mitchell," she stammered, "you're early." "I've waited long enough," I said. The office buzzed with low murmurs. Clara's colleagues were already there, chatting near the coffee machine, their curiosity palpable. Clara herself stood by her desk, wearing a fitted navy suit, every hair in place, her perfume thick in the air. She smiled when she saw me, but it was a brittle thing, like glass about to crack. "Maria," she said sweetly, "and you brought a lawyer. How formal." "Truth likes formality," I replied. "It keeps things clean." Before she could respond, Mr. Collins stepped forward, setting his briefcase on the table. "Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for hosting this meeting. We'll keep it brief." Clara crossed her arms, eyes flicking toward her coworkers. "This should be interesting." "Oh, it will be," I said quietly. Mr. Collins opened the briefcase and began placing documents on the table one by one. Copies of the house deed property tax records, the bank statements, the will. Each sound of paper hitting the table felt like a heartbeat in the silence. The room's atmosphere shifted. The agents stopped whispering. Someone's phone buzzed, then fell silent again. Clara's voice broke the stillness. "What is this?" "This," Mr. Collins said calmly, "is a clarification of ownership. According to legal records filed and notarized all of David Mitchell's property, this includes the house at 447 Maple Street. The life insurance policy and his savings belong solely to Mrs. Maria Mitchell. You are not listed as beneficiary on any document." For a second, no one moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the office air conditioner. Then Clara laughed that brittle sound again. "That's absurd. My husband left everything to me. I'm his widow." Mr. Collins adjusted his glasses. "Your husband filed an updated will last year. Here's his signature, verified by 2 witnesses and notarized. You'll find that it explicitly revokes any prior versions." Clara snatched the document from the table, her hands shaking as she scanned it. "This is fake," she hissed. "You must have forged this." He raised an eyebrow. "If you'd like to make that accusation in front of the county clerk, you're welcome to. But I assure you it's very real." Her eyes darted toward me, fury and disbelief colliding in her expression. "You think you can take everything from me?" I met her gaze steadily. "I'm not taking anything, Clara. I'm just reclaiming what was always mine." She slammed the document down. "You conned him. You manipulated him while he was dying. You made him change the will." Actually, Mr. Collins said he recorded a statement about that. He pulled out the small flash drive, inserted it into a laptop, and turned the screen so everyone could see. "Would you like to hear it?" Clara's confidence faltered. "No," she said quickly. "There's no need for theatrics." But her colleagues leaned forward, curiosity overtaking politeness. One of them, Jessica, I remembered her name, said, "If he recorded something, maybe we should hear it." Clara's face went pale. "Jessica, stay out of this." But Mr. Collins had already clicked play. The video began with a faint hum of background noise. Then David appeared on screen, sitting at his desk, wearing a soft gray sweater. He looked tired, but calm. His voice, gentle and familiar, filled the room. "Hi, Mom. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. I wanted to make sure you knew the truth." The office went completely silent. "I love you, Mom, and I'm sorry for what she did to you. I saw it all the way she spoke to you, the way she tried to erase you from our lives. I thought I could fix it, that she'd change, but I was wrong. So I did what I should have done sooner. I changed the will. Everything I have goes back to you because none of it would exist without you. You built our home. You gave me everything. This isn't about money, it's about dignity. Don't let her take that from you." The camera shook slightly as he leaned closer. "And Clara, if you're watching this, I hope you learn that cruelty always circles back. I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean freedom from consequences." He smiled weakly at the end, that same boyish smile I had known all my life. "Goodbye, Mom. Be strong." The screen went black. A heavy silence filled the room. No one dared move. Clara stood frozen, her eyes locked on the blank monitor. Her colleagues stared at her, their expression shifting from shock to disgust to pity. Jessica whispered, "Oh my God." Clara finally found her voice, but it cracked as she spoke. He was manipulated. He wasn't in his right mind." Mr. Collins closed the laptop gently. The recording was time-stamped and verified by the hospital's legal department. His mental clarity was confirmed by his attending physician. "You might want to be careful what you imply, Mrs. Mitchell." Her knees wobbled, and she grabbed the edge of the table for balance. "You can't do this," she whispered. I stepped forward, my voice quiet but firm. "It's already done." The receptionist appeared at the doorway, hesitant. "Mrs. Mitchell, there are reporters outside. Someone must have tipped them off." Clara turned pale. "Reporters." Jessica's voice was calm but cold. "Word travels fast in this business. You've been telling everyone this house was yours, Clara. You even tried to list it online." Clara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her reputation, the thing she prized above all else, was unraveling in front of her eyes. Mr. Collins handed her an envelope. "This is the official notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Failure to comply will result in eviction proceedings." She tore it open, scanning the letter. Her hands trembled. "You're all making a mistake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I loved him." I looked at her not with hatred, but with a kind of sad clarity. "Maybe you did, but love without respect isn't love. It's ownership." Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't seem to let fall. "What am I supposed to do now?" "Start over," I said softly, the way I had to. For a long moment she just stood there, silent, her face crumbling under the weight of the truth. Then she turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the floor, each step fainter than the last. No one stopped her. No one spoke. When the door closed behind her, the office exhaled collectively as if everyone had been holding their breath. Jessica looked at me, eyes shining. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said quietly, "I don't think I've ever seen justice served so perfectly." I smiled faintly. "It's not justice," I said. "It's balance." Mr. Collins packed up his papers and turned to me. "It's done, Maria. You can go home." "Home," I repeated softly, letting the word roll around in my mouth like something I was tasting for the first time in years. "Yes, home." As I walked out of the office, flashes from reporters' cameras lit the entrance. I didn't speak to them. I didn't need to. The story would tell itself. Behind me, whispers rippled through the crowd. Words like inheritance, betrayal, will mother's revenge. But that wasn't what this was. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Outside, the sunlight was warm, almost gentle. For the first time since David's death, I felt him beside me. Not in grief, but in peace. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "I kept my promise, my boy." I stood up. If you've ever watched truth walk into a room and silence every lie, you know what I felt that day. It's not triumph, it's peace, finally breathing again. If you believe the strongest voice in any room can be the quietest one-comment one. If you've ever seen dignity win without shouting, "Leave a like." By the next morning, the story had already begun to spread like wildfire. I didn't need to tell anyone. Truth has a way of traveling on its own. The video from the meeting had leaked somehow. Someone at the office must have recorded it. Maybe Jessica, maybe one of the agents standing in the back. By dawn, it was everywhere. The title read, "Widow Caught Lying About Late Husband's Will. The Real Owner Speaks." Within hours, the clip had been shared thousands of times. My voice, calm and even, played over the image of Clara's shock, and people couldn't stop talking about it. Helen came running to my house that morning, breathless, holding her phone. "Maria, you're all over the internet," she said, eyes wide. "Everyone's seen it." I stared at her stunned. "Everyone," she nodded. "Look." There I was, frozen on the screen, older, composed, steady, as the caption scrolled across, "The quiet mother who proved respect isn't inherited, it's earned." The comments were pouring in faster than she could read them. Her calm destroyed that woman. Justice has a mother's face. I hope I have her strength when I'm her age. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. All I'd ever wanted was peace, but somehow my pain had become public proof that silence could roar louder than hate. Across town, Clara wasn't silent. Reporters had camped outside her apartment complex. Her brokerage firm released a statement that afternoon. Premier Realty has terminated Mrs. Clara Mitchell effective immediately. They said her professional integrity had been compromised. Helen sat across from me at the kitchen table, reading aloud from her phone. "They're calling you the woman who made silence famous." She looked up and smiled. "Can you believe that?" I shook my head. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted her to stop lying. "Maybe that's why it worked," Helen said softly. "You didn't scream. You just told the truth." By the end of the week, the story reached the local news. A reporter knocked on my door one afternoon. She was young, polite, careful. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, "people are calling you an inspiration. Do you have any message for others who've been silenced by family?" I thought for a moment. "Yes," I said. "Don't mistake quiet for weakness. Sometimes quiet is just the sound of preparing." That quote ended up everywhere on blogs, social media pages, even framed in the window of the local newspaper office. I didn't ask for any of it, but I understood now that stories have their own lives. And sometimes they teach people things we never intended to say. Meanwhile, the ripple of consequences reached deeper than I expected. 3 of Clara's former clients withdrew their listings publicly, citing ethical concerns. Her professional license was suspended pending review. A rumor spread that she'd been blacklisted by multiple agencies. People who had once adored her social charm now avoided her in public. Helen told me she saw her at the grocery store one morning, pushing a half-empty cart through the clearance aisle. She looked different, Helen said. Smaller, like she finally realized no one was watching her anymore. I didn't smile at that. I didn't celebrate. I just nodded. Maybe now she'll understand what silence feels like. A week later, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, trembling. It was from Clara. "Maria, I've lost everything, the house, my job, my reputation. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm sorry. David was right about me. I wanted control, not love. You don't have to answer, but I hope you'll pray for me, Clara." I read it 3 times, then folded it neatly and set it in the same box where David's letter still rested. Some stories end with anger. Mine didn't. It ended with understanding. Helen came over that night with her usual cup of tea. "Did you reply?" "No," I said quietly. "I don't need to." She already heard the only truth that mattered. Outside, the neighborhood was alive again. People waved when I stepped outside. A few even stopped to tell me their own stories. Mothers, daughters, neighbors, people who had lost their voices to someone louder. It was strange hearing them call me brave when all I had done was open a box and tell the truth inside it. The church invited me to speak at their community evening 2 weeks later. I hesitated at first, but Helen insisted. "You don't have to talk about her," she said. "Just talk about what you learned." That night, standing at the front of the small chapel, I looked out at the faces, old and young men and women, all waiting. I took a deep breath. "When you lose someone you love," I began, "you think the worst pain is their absence. But sometimes the worst pain is what people do with your silence after they're gone. They try to fill it with lies, with greed, with noise. But silence doesn't mean defeat. It means patience. It means you're waiting for truth to have its turn. The room was still. Even the candles seemed to listen. I learned that the quietest person in the room isn't always the weakest, I said. Sometimes she's the one who already knows how the story ends. Afterward, people came up to hug me. Some cried, some just nodded in quiet understanding. That night, walking home under the streetlights, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: lightness, the kind that comes not from victory, but from release. By morning, the online storm had begun to calm, but the message lingered. A friend from church sent me a text that read, "The fire's dying down, Maria, but the warmth remains." And that, I realized, was what truth really was, not a blaze meant to destroy, but a flame that lights what was hidden. If you believe truth spreads faster than lies when spoken with grace, comment 1. If you've ever seen justice catch fire and burn away every falsehood, leave a like. The storm didn't end overnight. Scandals never do, they just change shape. A week after the story broke, the noise began to fade, replaced by whispers. People no longer said Clara's name with curiosity. They said it with pity. And that, I think, was the harsher punishment. She vanished from the neighborhood first. Her car disappeared from the driveway one morning, her windows dark by evening. The for sale sign that once stood proudly on her lawn had been pulled out of the ground and tossed aside, broken. The house, my house, stood empty for a while, silent, waiting. Mr. Collins called to confirm the transfer was finalized. "It's officially yours again, Maria," he said. "Every document, every title, every cent." I thanked him, though gratitude wasn't what I felt. It wasn't joy either. It was peace. Quiet, steady, earned. I didn't want revenge. I wanted restoration. And now that it was done, all I could think about was what to do with what remained. Helen helped me move back in. We took it slowly. Every room held ghosts, every corner whispered memories. In David's old bedroom, the air still carried the faint scent of cedar and laundry soap. His books were gone, his clothes too, but the space felt alive again. I sat on his bed that first night and whispered, "It's home again, my love. You did it." Helen stood at the doorway, tears in her eyes. "You know," she said softly, "most people would have torn this place apart, changed everything." "I don't want to erase him," I said. "I want to preserve him." And so I did. The next few weeks were quiet. Reporters stopped calling, neighbors stopped whispering, and slowly life returned to its gentle rhythm. Every morning, I'd water the new roses I planted in the garden, the same spot where Clara's fake turf had once smothered the soil. Real flowers, real roots, real life. Then one morning, a letter arrived, official, sealed with the emblem of the local court. Clara had filed a petition to contest the will. I took it to Mr. Collins immediately. He scanned it quickly, sighed, and said, "She's desperate. It won't go anywhere." He was right. 2 weeks later, the court dismissed her claim for lack of evidence. That was the final blow. After that, she stopped fighting. Months passed. I didn't hear her name again until Helen mentioned seeing her outside a bus station downtown. She looked lost, Helen said. No ring, no car, no makeup, just a woman with a suitcase. I nodded. Then maybe she finally learned something about value. I didn't say it cruelly. I meant it. I'd spent a lifetime watching people mistake ownership for worth noise for strength. But Clara's downfall wasn't a punishment. It was a lesson written in consequence. With the house legally restored and my peace slowly returning, I decided to do something David would have wanted. I met with Mr. Collins again and set up the David Mitchell Fund for Integrity in Family Care. It wasn't much at first, just a portion of the insurance money, but it was enough to help older parents find legal and emotional support when families turned cruel. The local paper ran a small story about it, Mother Turns Grief into Grace. That headline made me smile. For once the world got something right. One afternoon, months later, I got another letter. This time it wasn't official. No seal. Just plain handwriting on a white envelope. It was from Clara again. "Maria, I saw the article about the fund. You did what I couldn't turn loss into something good. I'm in Columbus now working part-time at a diner. I'm trying to start over. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say thank you for not destroying me when you could have. Clara." I sat at the table for a long time after reading it. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or pity. I felt release. She was finally living with the one thing that never fades, remorse. That night, as the sun sank behind the trees, I lit a candle for both of them. My son, who taught me strength, and the woman who taught me boundaries. Some lessons come from love. Others come from betrayal. Both shape who we become. Helen joined me on the porch, a mug of tea in hand. "You think she'll ever change?" she asked. "I think she already has," I said. Change doesn't always look like redemption. Sometimes it just looks like survival. We sat in silence for a while, the air cool and still. The house behind me glowed softly in the fading light. For the first time in years, it felt alive again. "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" Helen asked. I thought about that, about the months of humiliation, the quiet rage, the nights I cried into my pillow, praying for strength. Then about the day my son's voice played in that office, the calm power in his words, the way truth finally came home. "No," I said finally. "If they had, I might still be silent." Helen smiled faintly. "Then maybe silence really was your weapon all along." I looked out at the roses swaying in the evening breeze. "No," I said softly. "It was my shield. The truth was the weapon. If you've ever seen justice come quietly, you know it doesn't need applause. It just needs time. If you believe forgiveness isn't weakness, but wisdom." Comment 1. If you've ever rebuilt your piece from the ruins someone left behind, leave a like. It took me almost a year to gather the courage to return to the cemetery. Grief, I've learned, doesn't fade. It reshapes itself. It becomes quieter, more deliberate, like the tide. But that morning, when I woke and saw the sunlight spilling through the curtains, I knew it was time. I dressed simply, dark skirt, cream blouse, a single white rose in my hand. The drive to St. Mary's Cemetery was short, but every turn of the road felt like a memory. I remembered David's laugh echoing in the back seat when he was young, his head resting against the window during long trips home from college, the way he used to say, "You drive too slow, Mom." When I reached his grave, the world was still. The grass was neatly trimmed. The air smelled faintly of rain. I knelt and placed the rose against the polished stone. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered. "It's been a while." I sat in silence for a long time, listening to the wind move through the trees. There were no tears this time, only warmth, a strange kind of peace that felt both heavy and light. "I did what you asked," I said quietly. "I stood up. I didn't let her win. You'd be proud of me, I think." I smiled faintly. "You were right, you know. Silence is power, but sometimes power also needs a voice." And I finally found mine. From my purse, I took out the small wooden box. It had traveled with me through every stage of the story. Betrayal, loss, truth, and now closure. The wood had darkened with time, but the carved initials remained clear. Inside, still folded perfectly, was the letter. I had read it so many times that the paper had softened at the edges. But today I wasn't reading it again. Today I was returning it. "This belongs here now," I whispered, placing the letter gently at the base of the headstone. "You gave it to me when I needed strength. Now I give it back to you, because I've found mine." A breeze lifted, carrying the scent of roses and wet earth. For a moment I could almost hear his voice again, calm, kind full of quiet conviction. "I forgive you, Mom." I closed my eyes, smiling through the ache. "I forgive you too," I said softly, "for leaving me with so much silence. But you were right. Silence has its purpose. It gave me time to learn who I was without anyone else's permission." Behind me, footsteps crunched on the gravel. I turned and saw Helen walking toward me, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought I'd find you here," she said, setting one down beside me. "You know me too well," I said. "I should," she replied. "I've watched you bloom out of the ashes." We sat together quietly, sipping coffee, watching sunlight dance across the gravestones. After a while, Helen asked, "Do you ever think about what you'd say to her now?" "To Clara." I thought about that for a moment. "Yes," I said. "I'd tell her thank you." Helen blinked. "Thank you," I nodded, "for teaching me that boundaries are sacred, that dignity isn't something you ask for, it's something you enforce. Without her cruelty, I might never have discovered the strength that comes from calm." Helen smiled. "You always find grace in the hardest places." "I think that's what survival really is," I said. "Not escaping pain, but transforming it. We stayed there until the sun began to dip behind the hills, the light turning golden. The shadows stretched across the grass, long and soft. Before leaving, I stood once more, brushing my hand over David's name. "You taught me everything, my son," I whispered, "even after you were gone." On the drive home, the world looked different. Familiar streets seemed gentler, slower. The house came into view at the end of Maple Street, its windows glowing in the dusk. It didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt alive again. Inside, the air smelled of roses and warm bread. The photo of David and me, the one Clara had once taken off the mantel, was back where it belonged. I lit a candle beside it, the flame flickering softly. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. Later that night, I sat at my desk and began writing a letter, not to Clara, not to the press, not even to the world, to myself. "Dear Maria, you've lived through the kind of loss that can bury a soul, but you didn't stay buried. You found your strength in the same silence they mistook for weakness. You learned that revenge isn't shouting louder, it's living better. You learned that dignity doesn't need witnesses, it needs consistency. And most of all, you learned that grief isn't the end of love, it's its final form." I sealed the letter and placed it beside David's candle. Tomorrow I would start a new chapter, not of survival, but of service. The foundation in his name was growing. More people were writing to me, sharing their own stories. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I had become something else, a keeper of truth for those who had lost their voice. I stood at the window watching the moon rise above the quiet street, the same street where I'd been humiliated then redeemed, the same house where I'd been thrown out then invited peace back in. Life has a strange way of completing its circles. And I realized something then: forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about letting the past become a teacher instead of a prison. Clara had become part of my story, but she no longer owned it. The pain she caused had turned into something greater, a reminder that even the deepest wound can become a scar you wear with pride. I blew out the candle, leaving the faint glow of the moon as my only light. The house was quiet, but not empty. It was filled with the echo of my son's laughter, the rhythm of my own breath, the strength of a woman who had reclaimed her voice. As I walked toward the door, I whispered into the silence, "Thank you, David, for everything." And maybe it was the wind, or maybe it was something more, but I could swear I heard his voice answer soft and sure. "You did good, Mom." If you've ever carried pain and turned it into purpose, you know what peace really feels like. It's not loud, it's not perfect, it's just enough. If you believe forgiveness is the final victory. Comment 1. If you've ever found power in choosing peace over revenge, leave a like.